Now, if there is one camp that has been properly hit in this year of 2025, as we are coming to the end of the year politically, and whose trajectory into the 2027 major polls might have taken a different turn, or might take a different turn in the remaining 18 months to the major elections, then that has to be the ODM camp. This camp, other than losing the founder of the party and the enigma in this country, the former Prime Minister of the Republic of Kenya, Raila Odinga, and dealing with that loss, also suffered from a transition period of whether or not this particular party position was to be given to Oburu Odinga or was to be given to other members of the party democratically. Other than that, within its own structure now, they are divided between the senior members feeling like this is the time that they are in government, and this party was formed to take power like any other party and not be in the united opposition, and so they are comfortable with working with President William Ruto. But in other camps, the youths are saying that it is their time to now patch the path of the ODM party, and they feel like Ruto is not the way to go in 2027 and beyond. But while all these divisions are happening, they are not only happening in the political stage, they are getting to the family level, where Winnie speaking sounds like disrespecting Oburu, and Oburu speaking feels like not having the spirit of the younger population, including Winnie Odinga, in the future of this particular political party. Now, it's gotten so serious that it has moved from a party idea to a family idea, where now Kenyans are looking at where does Ida point and where does Winnie point, but at the same time Kenyans also looking at where does Oburu point and where does the ODM party point. Now, the members of this particular party and political aspirants from this party are torn whether or not they should seek the validation of Wanga, including Boyd Were, who sought that validation and got into power in the by-elections in Kasipul, or whether or not they should follow the advice from the Odingas, irrespective of whether or not that particular advice has been discussed in the ODM national committees. Now, the year is coming to an end, and they have buried in less than 2 months both the enigma Raila Odinga and his sister, and these particular decisions are coming at a point when they are still giving ultimatum that they do not want anything short of the deputy presidency seat in 2027, saying that if there is nothing like that, then they are not joining a camp. Now, while this is happening, they have also just celebrated their 20 years as a party recently, being the only party that have survived 4 elections, fronting a presidential candidate in each of them. And they are seeking this particular number 2 position when they are very aware of the historical cheatings that have occurred in such arrangements with Moi before, and they are actually afraid that these cheatings might still take place in this particular time. Now, President Ruto is supposed to make a decision whether or not he's going with this camp. Kalonzo Musyoka is also wooing this camp, but within this camp, they are really undecided whether or not they are steering forward together up to 2027, or they are making their own political paths. Yesterday, 3 of them were found in the same podium, actually 4 or 5 or even more, but 3 controversial ones were in the same podium in the Penyumar Luo celebrations that was going on in Migori County, and was actually being hosted by Governor Ochilo Ayako, who is facing Nyamita in the general elections in 2027, and whose bid and success in that particular general election is actually very shaky. Now, we want to take a look at the statements that were made by the party leader Oburu Odinga, who is now the driver of this party into whatever coalition that they can get into between now and 2027. What he says is the intention of the party moving forward. After that, we'll take a look at the statements by Wanga, who is currently facing a very hard task locally against Raymond Omolo on dominance and on who should the Luo people follow moving forward independent of the party, and the statements that she said now that she is hoping to have that particular support on her back. But other than that, we'll also take a look at the statements of Governor Orengo James, who has been the individual that speaks his mind controversially, irrespective of what the party holds or what the party stands for politically, moving into the 2027 major polls. Now, if this is your first time interacting with the People's Mirror, just hit the subscribe button. That way, these stories will be coming for you daily if you have your notifications on. But other than that, it will also be helping in our growth as the People's Mirror. So let's start with the statements that were made by Oburu. Oburu started by saying in Luo that Pinyo Siko Toxikia. Now, the meaning of this saying is that the world lives forever, but we don't. And so it's a realization that he says should ring at the mind of each Kenyan, that each Kenyan should remember that the young go the same way the old go, and the time of going can come at any time. So whatever you do, do it knowing that the world lives, but we don't live in it forever. And now Oburu says, it details, because this was actually a celebration of the tribe, for a celebration that they were saying that they were doing for the 5th time, with the first time of this celebration done in Siaya, where they were bringing together the Luo nation from the 4 counties that are predominantly occupied by Luos, and they were going beyond border to Uganda, Tanzania, and all these other places. So he says the first one occurred in Siaya, then the second one occurred in Homa Bay during Governor Awiti, the third one in Homa Bay under Governor Wanga. The 4th one took place in Kisumu, and now of course the 5th one was in Migori. And in attendance were, of course, as I said, members of this community from across the East African region. Now, in his very interesting analogy of the history of the community, Oburu now says that the wife, the biblical Moses, Zipporah, was actually Luo. And so that left people laughing, but he detailed it on a very interesting sequential story. You can take a look at that episode later on the medias that captured it live, in a very interesting way that I almost got convinced that whatever he was saying was true. Of course, later on, an in-depth reading will reveal whether or not that was true. So he gives the detailed story of Luos from a river in China that he says is called River Luo, and it's a river where the community goes to pray because it gives them hope, and saying that it's this particular Far East story in the Bible that talked about 3 wise men coming from the Far East that introduces the Chinese into this story. And he says that these 3 wise men that came from the Far East to see baby Jesus in the story of Jesus and everything were actually Chinese, saying that the Far East, just as it meant then, still means the East right now. So they came with this tag of the name of the community. And by the time they were coming, he says that the Israelites in Egypt were made of both the Israelites and the Luos. And so he comes with this idea to Egypt. Now Oburu goes on in just a quick brief. I just want to tell this part of the story as a quick brief because it connects to the political statements that I want to take a look at briefly. So he says that when these people arrive, and now the Israelites have been, saved, and they are going back, then the Israelites say that they cannot go back with black people. And so that is where Moses' wife Zipporah is left, as Moses lives with the Israelites. And he says that in this particular journey of Moses, the Israelites leaving his wife, while the Egyptians were chasing the Israelites through the sea, the Luos followed the Nile path. And so he's saying that because of the name that they had been given as a result of the river, they also called the Nile Luo, because it was a river that was giving them hope. Now he says that they are also called the Nilotes because, of course, they followed River Nile, and that's a common historic fact. But how he details is how they land in Bahr al Ghazal, others in Uganda, others in Gutramogi, forming Uganda, saving Uganda from Bachwezi, and the entire story. Now that story is not relevant if you are looking at it from a community point of view, but that story is relevant when you're looking at it from a community leader point of view, and someone whose political statements need to be looked at beyond now the ODM party, but be looked at as the only remaining voice of the Jaramogi that have been a very key factor in the unity of this community. Now Oburu says that is very, very aware that politically they have been played before. And he says he's aware that politically they were played before during the time of his father, when his father was actually among the founding strong people in the history of this particular nation alongside Tom Mboya, but power had to go because his father had to wait for Kenyatta to actually be released and handed over that power to Kenyatta, only for his father to be ousted from that particular government that they formed. And now he talks about the Moi regime also doing the same to Raila. He says that at one point when Moi's succession story was actually being discussed, Moi had told their camp that actually Raila was going to be a successor, and Moi had also told a Kalenjin friend that Uhuru Kenyatta was going to be the successor. And so he says that when he had a conversation with this Kalenjin friend, his Kalenjin friend asked him who the successor would be, and he confirmed that they had been promised it would be Raila, only for the successor to tell him that it would be Uhuru Kenyatta, and it turned out to be Uhuru Kenyatta. So he says that he's living in constant fear and on distrust, and is aware of this every day, that this particular way could still go the Kenyatta way or could even go the Moi way. And of course this reminds us of something. You remember when Oburu Odinga talked about there is no position that they would take other than the deputy party position? The next statements that were being made by Senator Chirigai, who is actually very, very close to the president, and the statements were clear that in 2027, according to Chirigai, the position of the president and the deputy president was not negotiable to anyone. So from Chirigai's statement, he was saying that 2027 is already sorted. It will be Ruto as president and deputy Kindiki as vice president. While at this particular camp, the only thing that the ODM party is sustaining the court of Ruto with is perhaps that Gladys Wanga be given the position of vice president in the 2027 arrangement, a position that even certain members of the ODM party themselves do not support. So for the ODM party, the promise is that stay close, we are going to give you the deputy presidency position, and most likely let's groom Wanga. But from the government confines and the president's allies, it's like we are not giving anyone the position of the deputy president and the vice presidency in 2027. Now you see, it's just characters that have been changed, but the narrative remains the same with the Moi betrayal, because then Moi was a Kalenjin president, Ruto is a Kalenjin president, no difference. Raila was supposed to succeed from the Luo nation, Wanga is supposed to succeed, but to succeed as a deputy president in this scenario from the Luo nation. The story was told to a confidant who was a Kalenjin, who is Oburu's friend. The story perhaps has been told to Chirigai, who is a confidant of President Ruto, and the replacement was to come from the mountain President Uhuru Kenyatta, the fourth president of the republic, the fourth president of the Republic of Kenya, of course, the fourth president of the Republic of Kenya. And now the replacement looks like Kindiki from the mountain. Of course, I don't know whether it's the fifth now but under the new constitution, we'd currently say is the second deputy president it's actually the third. Is the third deputy president under the new constitution, because the first deputy president was President William Ruto. The second deputy president remains President Rigathi Gachagua, and of course the third president under the new constitution is now the third vice president under the new constitution is now Vice President Kithure Kindiki. If I made a mistake with the presidency instead of vice presidency in that hierarchy, pardon me. The first deputy president was William Ruto. The second deputy president under the dispensation of the new constitution was Rigathi Gachagua, and the third deputy president so far under that new constitution is Kithure Kindiki. And so Oburu talks of that, and we were just making that particular connection, because if that is what happened with the betrayal of Raila, then it seems like history is just repeating itself, same script, different characters, and we will see how that plays into 2027. So Bruce says that they're aware of what is going on, and of course admits that they are afraid and they are living and tiptoeing in a place of distrust because they do not know how 2027 is going to play out. But he says something very important. He says that before they get to a point of trusting Ruto, because he says that trust is kind kind of shaking right now in 2027. And to see the arrangement, one thing is very important: the growth of the party. And so he calls for the growth of the party. He tells the members of the party to take to go and take votes. He tells the members the voting cards. He tells the members of the party to ask more people to join the party, because if the party is strong, then he will have a stronger negotiating power in the seat of power in 2027, either for the condition that they are saying right now of deputy presidency or no condition, or even for other conditions with any other coalition that they decide to go with in 2027. So he says the major thing right now between now and then is to ensure that the party is grown in a strong manner. So he tells Orengo that he does not plan to leave the government, however, saying that there is no party, of course the slogan of his late brother, that was formed to be in the opposition. Every party is formed to take power. So to that level, he says that he might not be comfortable with leaving power yet, but they will do everything humanly possible to make sure that they form the next power. Now, away from Wanga comes the chairperson of the party right now, Gladys. Away from Oburu comes the chairperson of the party right now, Gladys Wanga. And Wanga now says that Raila had seen the mountaintop and he knew that he might not be moving forward with them, but he knew that if they were together, then they will surely see the promised land being Canaan. And Honorable Gladys Wanga stressed on the word together. And you'd understand why she'd stress on the word together in such a gathering, because this was coming at a time when there is these hitchbacks within their own party dynamics and beyond the party of who should really people rally behind. Raymond Omolo now is projecting or entering this particular scene as the right-hand man of President William Ruto when it comes to policies and development in the Nyanza region. And Gladys Wanga is also portraying herself as the governor that has worked successfully in the Nyanza area and delivered under the first term that she was working under as a governor and under the instructions of Raila Odinga. And so after Raila Odinga, she feels that Raila Odinga left us in a unity that did not take in consideration people like Raymond Omolo, and the Luo people should not turn away from that unity. Yet if we are talking about unity and segregating other people, then what kind of unity are we talking about? So she trails her position as a female community leader to some anthropological woman that Bethuel Ogot detailed in her book. And this is very, very important, because remember, Winnie at some point said that we might be talking about equality, but we're not living in an equal community. And for Winnie Odinga, she was giving an example with just asking a question, saying that if a woman asks a question in Bondo, and if a man asks the same question in Bondo and not in a respectful manner, then for the man it will be leadership, and for the woman it will be looked at as disrespect. And so for Wanga also to rally this solid support behind her back, we are not talking of winning the gubernatorial seat of Homa Bay. That is a small thing compared to having an entire community rally behind your back as their leader. And so Wanga looks at this, that for her to have this particular bargaining power beyond just the governor of a county and to rally the Luo support, if she was to negotiate for a position of the deputy presidency, for example, then she has to first stem her authority to something that the Luo people will believe in beyond the political statements of Homa Bay County. And so this is very hard for a woman, actually. For a woman who is trying to ascend to these political seats, you have to work twice as hard as the men. And sometimes you can work twice as hard as the men and still not even amass a huge support in the national figure. We have seen that with people like Martha Karua, who have done very, very a lot for this nation. But when it comes to how the votes, translates to their particular basket of leadership, then we see that doing very minimally. And so for women leaders, it was important for Wanga to do what she did. She trailed her position as a female community leader to that Luo anthropological woman, saying that this is not the first time that actually Luo women are leading communities, and Luo women have led and fought for communities before in a way that does not make this new. So she went ahead to say that it is very, very, it does not mean that she cannot be voted, of course, in as a governor, but she was looking for something bigger than that in her statement, or even in the mood of her statements. So now she's devising new ways of getting and maintaining the political validation, because she needs this particular political validation, whether or not she's going as the second term governor in Homa Bay, where right now, of course, Homa Bay is divided in the sense that even Wanga's own administration is divided on supporting her in 2027. So she needs a lot of validation to even win the gubernatorial seat. But should Ruto heed to this particular call that the ODM party has been having of a broad-based arrangement that gives them the deputy presidency position, then she even needs a bigger validation from the community that goes beyond the county. Also, yeah, so for the rise of Wanga, of course, she will have to do twice the job that the men in her positions do, but she's taking it rather very positively, and we hope to see how that turns out. She didn't make much of statements. She just, sang, ululated for Raila, saying that she had never had time to actually cry for Raila Odinga publicly, and that was the last Luo festival, so they did that. Now let's take a look at Orengo's statements as we conclude this episode. Orengo was the most controversial speaker again, just like he always has been. He recollects the betrayal, saying Jaramogi was betrayed and Boya was killed. And he says these were the first two community figures that actually mattered in this country, not just in the community. Now he asked the ODM supporters, saying that Raila's legacy is bigger than all the presidents that we have seen. He says that Raila's legacy is bigger than President Kenyatta, Moi, President Kibaki, President William Ruto's legacy is what he says. We are yet to see how it turns out, but he confirms that Raila's legacy is even bigger than Uhuru Kenyatta's legacy as a president. So he has clues to do a proper recollection ahead of 2027, saying that there have been instances where they are promised and then they get into negotiation table and then the table shifts on them. And of course, the stories like Oburu details back to Uhuru Kenyatta, the senior Kenyatta's time, Moi's time, Kibaki's time, Uhuru's time. And he says that let us not entirely bank on an outgoing president as a people that supported Raila Odinga. And he asks his people not to bank on an outgoing president, saying that they had banked on an outgoing president during the Kenyatta story and see where that left them. And so he says in 2027, Ruto will be serving his second term, and you cannot guarantee yourself with a president who is serving his second term to put your interests at heart. So he tells the people of that part of the country to take a deep look into this particular arrangement that they are being asked to join in 2027, being aware of one, past betrayals, but number two, the fact that you cannot bank on an outgoing president. So now he puts his cards. He asks President Ruto to put his cards on the table for all of them to see, so that they do not operate in limbo moving into these particular elections and find themselves just like in the 2022 elections. So it's been a pleasure recapping what happened from these particular leaders in that conference that they attended. A few activities are taking place because now we are just a few days, less than 10 days to the festive season. And here at the People's Mirror, we keep you updated as they unfold. So keep it the People's Mirror until our next episode.